Thanks, Charles.
Oh,
So I am going to introduce Amanda Arrowsmith. She's going to do our session today on how all transformation needs to be people first. So, embracing all of that AI, we also have to kind of ensure that we remember about the people and the people profession. Uh, with us as the people profession, we've got a critical role in making those changes stick. So, a little bit about Amanda. She's the Executive Director of People in OD at the Royal British Legion. She's had over 20 years in senior HR and transformation roles, in, in nearly 30 years in total within HR, including until June this year as People and Transformation Director at the CIPD. Alongside her executive roles, she is a doctoral researcher, which is focused on culture, power, and transformation in not-for-profit organisations. So a really warm welcome to Amanda. Thank you, Amanda.
thank you so much. I'm going to try and share my slides. Now, I am not a Zoom user, so I have no idea if that is working. Let's try that one. No, no, it's not. It's working for you. It's not working for me. Can you see that? I don't know. I'm so sorry. I am trying desperately. I don't use Zoom.
So we can,
Let me
Amanda,
try one more.
okay.
No, that's not working, is it? Can you see that?
So we can see that, Amanda, but it's not in sort of slideshow format. It's we can see sort of like all the sets of slides.
Yeah, the problem is if I do that, I can't see my notes, which means
Oh,
which means I can't help you. Could you share it for me at that end? I'm so
just
sorry, everyone. Thank you,
that's
Sandra,
fine.
for that lovely introduction. That was very kind.
Yeah, let me just get them. If I stop sharing your screen, and I will share them for you. If you just want to say next slide for me.
I will. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry, everyone. Apologies for that. Uh, yeah, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. That was very kind. So as Sandra was saying, as the slides are coming up, I'll just do a little bit. I describe myself as a bit of a transformation strategist. I'm a senior HR leader. I've worked in human
Oh,
resources. I'm a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development. It's my I love HR. I love what we do. I think we're a proper profession, and I'm proud to work in our profession. But I also have started my doctoral research, but I'm not doing a PhD. I'm doing a doctorate in business administration, and I'm focused on transformation and change in the not-for-profit sector. And the reason I'm doing that is because I wanted to do something that would really help practice. So I wanted to kind of do the academic work, but I also wanted something that really helped practice and would take that practice forward. And here we are. There we go. I've waffled a little bit. So as I was saying, much of my work has been involved in either leading change, or working as part of teams looking at change. So sometimes that's been large scale cultural change. So transformation, sometimes it's about new technologies, sometimes restructuring, or maybe accelerated growth. But one truth for me has come every time. Transformation only succeeds when people make it succeed. So that's why today I want to explore why transformation must be people first. I'm going to make the case that the people profession, we're not a support act in transformation and change. In this story, we're central to where the change lands, lasts, and whether it actually delivers that sustainable results. The single most important truth that I want you to take away is that transformation only works when people make it real. And I've just remembered my camera's here and I'm looking up here where I can see myself. So apologies. So again, me and Zoom not working. Also, full disclosure, I started at the Royal British Legion last Wednesday. So this is day 6, I think. Day 6 or day 7. And so I'm on a new system and all those sorts of things. So I am only human, it appears. So in terms of working together, here's our plan. We're going to look at why transformation often stalls. We're also going to explore the research, and then we're going to talk about what the practical role the pre-professional do. So before we move into that theory and data, for this one, and I'm sorry if some of this is small, but you'll get copies of these afterwards. I want to invite you just to reflect a little. I know that's difficult when we're not in the room together and we're online, but I just want you to just reflect a little and think back to when you were last involved in a major change initiative. You might be involved in one now. It's very possible that you're involved in one now. Could have been a merger, maybe a digital rollout, or a major cultural shift. And I want you to ask yourself, what was the difference between success and failure? So, was it a carefully produced strategy? Was it the project plan? Or is it, and was it how people engaged, how your leaders behaved, and whether your culture supported or resisted the change? In most cases, it's people that make the difference. And I want you to keep that thought in mind as we continue and maybe make a note for yourself. What gets in the way of change? What is it in your organization that you think gets in the way of change? Resistance, confusion, maybe it's a lack of trust, or perhaps it's leaders telling one story and your employees living another. Next slide, please. So we can start a little bit with the context that we're operating in. So I came at the end of the last presentation where we were talking about AI, and I will touch on that in a minute, but transformation isn't something that happens once every couple of years. Most of you will have been when I asked you to think about the last time you were involved in a transformation, you might have thought, I don't remember when I wasn't involved in a transformational change. It feels constant, it's always happening, and it is a constant condition. But the context that we're operating in is really interesting, and we can't ignore that. We're living with continuous disruption. Markets and businesses are shifting rapidly. Technology is changing both how work is done, but also how value is created. We're in this early stages of an AI revolution. Like I said, I just joined, I think it was Charles was just talking at the end and showing you those tools. And that's really impacting. It's changing roles, it's changing skills. There's going to have all these ethical questions that we're going to face in work about how that AI works and what that means. So that's another thing we have to consider and we have to think about. Hybrid working has become a reality. We're seeing that shift back to more in-person working and that more online. But 6 years ago, would we have had this conference online where we all dialed up and we had an opportunity to spend the day learning from people whilst being in our own places? Probably not. So this way of that digital working it's much more real. And whilst that's great because it's given people lots of flexibility, it can make culture harder to sustain. But it also has made leadership more complex. Most of our leaders led because they saw people, and in people profession particularly, we saw when things were happening, didn't we? We saw things in the in-between, and now we don't, and so we have to take that into account. And then finally, I think that employee expectations are shifting. Those, they want more than just a pay packet. They want autonomy, flexibility, meaningful work. And at the same time, our organizations are still looking for us to provide agility and results. For public sector, membership bodies, and not-for-profits, those pressures, I believe, are even sharper. We're working with limited budgets and there's a lot of scrutiny, and that growth, relevance and financial sustainability is constant, and that those challenges around those are constant for us. Transformation, it's not a project that begins and ends. It's a condition of modern life. And I think, as I said, we recognize this. Change feels constant. I'm sure that if I could see you, you're probably nodding and smiling, going, yeah, this is my own experience. I mirror this and this is what we do. Next slide, please. But despite all of this activity, despite the fact that we're all working in transformation all the time and all this change is happening, transformation change itself often stalls. Now, I'm not going to quote, well, I am about to quote it, but you'll not see it in my evidence base, the Harvard Business Review article that said that 70% of all transformations fail, because that's not empirical evidence. That was somebody put their finger in the air and said it. That's not backed up by evidence. But what I am going to share with you today is some research and evidence that actually backs up why this happens and what it is. When transformation stalls or stumbles or even is not sustained, the research is really clear. It's rarely because of a poor strategy or broken systems. It's usually because of people. So Stensaker and Mayer in 2012 found that when organizations try to make too many changes at once, your employees experience overload. They've got that conflicting demands, shifting priorities, and we end up with what really you'll know as change fatigue or change burnout. And we know that if you've got too much change, so we're all excited, we all want this to happen, but sometimes it's a bit too much. Bartonek and colleagues in 2006, they actually studied how employees respond to change that's initiated by others. And they found that, interestingly, resistance isn't automatic. So people don't automatically come from a place where of resistance. It actually depends on how they make sense of that change. If they feel that it's imposed, they can resist. But if they feel part of it, they adapt. And then in 2017, which is 8 years ago now, doesn't feel that long ago, but it might be, yeah, more than 8 years ago, Bernard Burns, he argued that change is rooted in participation and culture. And that actually those top-down directives rarely last. So what you get is you get compliance. You'll get immediate compliance with a top-down directive, but you don't get sustainable change. So what this evidence shows us, this empirical, real evidence, shows us that when taken together, transformation falters, not because employees can't adapt, they can adapt, but it's because they don't necessarily see themselves in that story. They feel excluded from the meaning-making process, and change fails when people can't connect their own reality with the narrative that's being presented. So if you think of the changes that you've been involved in and think about when they perhaps haven't gone as successful or they've stalled and that you've seen that things that aren't going as fast as you want or as well as you want, was that because the technology didn't work, or was it because the people didn't connect with it? And I think for most of us, that's going to be the people. Next slide, please. So people first principle. Organizations are social systems first and foremost. We're social systems. So people create culture, people give meaning, people decide whether change sticks. I'm going to share a little bit more evidence to back this up, because what I want you to do by the end of this is go, I understand the evidence. This isn't someone just saying it's a nice thing to do. It's actually backed up, and also you can use it in any business cases that you might need going forward. So Edgar Schein describes organizational cultural layers, and you'll probably recognize this in your organization. So at the surface level, you've got your visible artifacts. So you'll see that, you may not be able to see actually, but you'll see that I'm wearing a poppy. We don't officially launch Poppy Day until the 23rd of October. I probably should say that. Look, 6 days in and I'm already saying these things. But we have those cultural artifacts that are our organization. You'll see them in the police, in the NHS, you'll see those sorts of things, those visible artifacts. Beneath that are those values, and they're not necessarily the values that we've written on the wall or that we've spent ages having consulting groups with our employees and building values up. It's the values of that. But beneath that, and most powerful of all, are these assumptions. And these are the basic assumptions that shape behavior and decision making day to day. And that's your cultural layers. So visible artifacts, values, cultural assumptions. That's all of that creates your culture. A French philosopher called Pierre Bourdieu, he talks about this idea of habitus, and you'll recognize that word. So the habitat, our habit, those two things. And habitus is about those ingrained dispositions and practices and those tendencies that people carry with them. And this explains why some people actually embrace new practices and they find that assessment, and others cling to the familiar. They cling to their habit. They cling to their habitus. And then finally, you've got Carl White. Carl White talks about sense making. Change is ambiguous. We know change is ambiguous. So people construct their meaning through conversations, shared stories, and through interpretation with colleagues, through making sense. If we design our transformation without acknowledging culture, habitus, and sense making, we end up with brilliant change on paper. We'll have a great program, it'll look fantastic, but not in practice. But if we design that in mind, so if we're thinking about it as we're doing it, that's where we really unlock sustainable change and change that sticks. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give you a little bit of research insight. So some of the things that I've been looking at. So I've given you some of the evidence, I've given you some of the empirical data, we've shared some of that data. I just want to give you a little bit of the insights. I mentioned my transformation, my doctorate is looking at transformation and change in not-for-profit organisations. I'm particularly focused on membership organisations, having spent 3 years at the CIPD and now at the Royal British Legion. Royal British Legion is a charity, but we have 200,000 members. We've got 50,000 volunteers and 2,000 staff. So we're a big scale organisation. And like many of you, I really didn't know what the Royal British Legion did until I started coming in for the interviews and having the conversation. We don't just do poppies. We do so much more than that in terms of support and community work. And we have care homes and we do lots and lots of things. But it's a large number of people. And those volunteers and those members are a large part of what we do. So when we're looking at transformation in not-for-profit, it's really interesting, and we need to make sure that we're thinking about those people and those stakeholder groups. But the information, one of the key things that has come out for me around transformation is that it's discursive. It happens through conversations, through stories, and through that meaning making. So before I talked about you need those 3 areas, and we touched a little bit on Carl Weick and sense making, but it's that conversations and those stories, and that's where your transformation happens and sticks. If your leaders are telling one story, that could be the strategy, the business case, the narrative for the future, and your employees are telling a different story, so the lived reality, the workload they're facing every day, the fairness of decisions, between those two sits your transformation layer. And it's your translation layer. So it's where you translate what happens between your leaders and your employees. And that's where we operate. So we interpret, we connect, and we help create that coherence between that leadership narrative. So what our leaders are saying is the business case and the strategy, and we've got this new 10-year strategy, and we're going to go this way, and what the employees are feeling in their lived experience. That's where we operate. We're doing that. And culture and power shape how we define that success within that translation layer. So your leaders, they're probably going to have KPIs, they're going to have targets, they're going to have people either through their, if you're in a not-for-profit, through their trustees and their members, or if you're in public sector, through your minister and how that works. They're going to have targets and KPIs that they're being measured at. But your employees, success for them could be about whether that change makes their job easier or more meaningful. And if those measures aren't aligned, your transformation falters. And once again, we get that immediate compliance. People will align to it, but we don't get the commitment. I'm pretty sure that many of you will recognize this tension in your own organization. Your leaders telling one story with good intent and they mean it what they're saying, but your employees living something else. That gap, that layer in between, that's where we get the risk. But that's why people professionals are so important. Next slide, please. So this is where people professionals, as I said, are so important. And this is the strategic role of our people professionals. So the CIPD's Future of Work research, which they do regularly, talks about people professionals, not as policy administrators, but as strategic cultural architects. We've got a number of things going on in our role, and I'm going to pull out 3 here. The first one I want to talk about is diagnosing culture. So we're going to surface those beliefs. We're going to look at those assumptions and that shape the behavior around us and really surface that habitus and those beliefs and that organizational culture piece. The second role that I think strategic people professionals have in strategic change is around bridging narratives. So it's that translating that strategic story into meaningful language for different groups. Because whilst before I talked about those 3 layers, your leadership layer, your employee layer, and that translation layer, actually that employee layer could be very different within your organization. You could be talking to frontline carers, people working in the front line. You could be talking to research scientists. You could be talking to marketeers and fundraising experts. And they might have a different need. And you need to take that strategic story, and one size isn't going to fit all. On this call today, some of you will resonate with some things I've said. Some of you will go, oh, that doesn't quite resonate with me. That's not quite the thing. But where this fits together and how that works, we need to make sure we're adapting that for the people that we're talking to. And then the third thing that I think is really important for us as people professionals is building that capability. So capability building, capacity building. And that's about developing the skills and behaviors and mindsets that are needed for change. We are not the soft side of hard change. We're actually the engine that makes transformation real. Next slide, please. I've shared research already, and I want to talk about moving on, so where we are. So there's things that anchor lasting change and things that support that. And research points to 3 anchors of lasting change. I'm going to deal with them in culture, leadership, alignment, and systems. They're not hierarchical. One is not more than another. It's just the nature of how they are on the slide. So the first one to talk about is culture, and that's the shared values and practices that shape how things are done. If your culture contradicts change, your culture will win. I am sure you've all sat down with someone who says, we want a high-performing team culture. We want a high-performing culture. If your practices, if what you've got doesn't sit together and how people behave and what that looks like, and it contradicts, that culture is going to win. The way that you are now is going to win out from that. I've talked about leadership sharing their knowledge and what they do, but the part that really anchors that lasting change is leadership alignment. Higgs and Rowland showed in 2011 that leadership behaviors directly affect outcomes. When your leadership is inconsistent, your trust will collapse. I'm sure we all in our careers have heard something, oh yeah, they always say that. Oh, well, they've said that before. We've heard that before. So if your leaders are not actually thinking about their alignment, they're not aligned, but they're inconsistent, you're going to lose that trust. And that's going to be one of these anchors that isn't going to help. The third one of these is your systems and structures. Change isn't going to happen just because you've got people. It isn't going to happen just because your leaders are saying it the right way. You need your systems and structures as well. And Beer and Noria in 2000, they argued that both your hard and your soft elements need to align. So if you are if you're doing some great work around leadership alignment, you've done some great work around your culture, but then I've got a system and process. And by system, I don't necessarily mean a text system. It could be a paper-based system. It could just be the way that things are done and the process you're doing. If you're going back to your old ways, then you're just going to erode that change. Again, you might get early compliance, but you'll not get anchored, lasting change. When you get these aligned, so when culture, leadership, and systems are aligned, transformation is sustainable. So we can keep that going. When they're not, it unravels. That sounds really simple. I appreciate it's not. But these are the keys. So these are the kind of big 3 anchors of lasting change. Next slide, please. Surprisingly enough, I'm going to come back with evidence again. I am an evidence-based practitioner. We are all evidence-based practitioners. It's really important. And you will all, HR, we don't deal with numbers, we don't deal with things. We do. And it's really important for us to show that up. So I'm going to share some big, scary numbers and then hopefully some meaningful numbers. So in 2023, Gallup reported, and I'm going to read this to make sure I get it exactly right, disengagement costs the world $8.8 trillion, which is 6.95 trillion pounds. That's 9% of global GDP. So that's the cost of ignoring our people. That's the cost of not listening. That's a waste of human potential. We're missing out on so much stuff. So I'm not even sure what a trillion is in terms of money. I can't quite picture it in my head, but 9% of global GDP. That's massive. It's a really big thing. The next one is the CIPD Good Work Index in 2024 found that meaningful work is the strongest predictor of engagement and accountability and adaptability, sorry. So employees who find work meaningful are more resilient, more productive, and more open to change. And then slightly older, so Gartner research from 2020 found that organizations with engaged employees achieve 21% higher profitability and functionality than their peers. So if you take these together in terms of everything else we've looked at already, these findings show us that people first, it's not optional, it's actually the only route to human and financial performance. So let's just let that sink in for a sec. Nearly £7 trillion lost through disengagement. 3/4 of employees saying they want meaningful work. Organisations with engaged workforces see their profitability or their performance increased by a fifth. There's your business case. We've got all the evidence we can show up, but that's your business case for putting people first. You can have the best technical transformation. You can have the best digital transformation program, but you have to put your people first. You have to show that. So how do you do that? What can people professionals do to take that forward? Next slide, please. So I'm going to give you 4 practical applications of what people professionals can do to make transformation stick. But I want to just put this, for me, change lands when people lead it. Our role as people professionals is to really make that change human. Culture, meaning, and trust, they're not soft edges. It always makes me laugh when people say, oh yeah, you do the soft stuff. No, we do the real gnarly, gritty human stuff, which isn't straightforward because we're not dealing with widgets, we're dealing with people. It's complicated and emotional and can be fraught with all that tension. And yeah, we work with people every day and we build those relationships, but this isn't soft. We know that change is going to continue. We know that it's not going to magically go, it's all right, we fixed everything now, change is done, we don't need to change anything more. We know it's going to continue. And so it's about how we change it together and we change it thoughtfully to get that sustainable change. So here are 4 things that I believe everyone can do on a micro scale, macro scale, in a way that can really bring this to life and help you with your people practice. So the first is culture mapping. So this is about, it's going back to the Wyke stuff really. Sorry, the Sheen stuff, the Sheen work on organizational culture and those three layers. Take some time before you start, if possible. I know it's not always possible. Sometimes we don't always come in at the beginning, but understand the current state of your culture before you design that future state. Really understand those assumptions. Remember I talked about the base level assumptions, those basic assumptions. They're the things that really make the impact. So really understand those assumptions, surface those assumptions, and any contradictions that you might have within there. The next thing I would encourage you to do is sense-making sessions. It sounds very grand. It's not. It's about creating opportunities for your people to interpret change together. They can surface in a safe environment, in a good conversation, what that looks like. And when people co-create meaning, so they're working together to co-create that meaning and that sense making, rumors and resistance diminish. It takes time, it takes effort, but it's a really great way of reducing those rumors, and that will then reduce resistance because people have that opportunity to understand where it is and make it make sense to them. The third one is something you've probably heard of. It's Radical Candor. It's Kim, and I can't remember her surname, has the book. But I think Brené Brown talks about it really well, as which clear is kind. And this is about being clear and direct, but also show that you care. This isn't about being blunt. This isn't about taking the opportunity to say I'm being direct and oh well I'm just being straightforward and direct. You know, I'm all for calling a spade a shovel. I like being direct in that way, but you've got to do it with compassion. So it's clarity with compassion, and your trust grows when you have conversations that are both honest and compassionate. So you'll remember before we talked about how translation has to be right for that right audience. That's also the compassion. You'll have some people who actually can go, yeah, this is what it is. I know it's coming. I can cope with this. We'll go with that. There are other people who will struggle, and you need to find different ways. So clarity with compassion, but be clear, be consistent, find a way to practice that radical candor. If you haven't read the book, it is a great book. There's lots of stuff on YouTube and there's loads of things around that you can find out about it. You can use whichever AI tools you've got available to you. through your agreed AI tools and just ask it to give you a summary of it. There's some great summaries out there. Highly recommend that. It's a great way of finding out about it. So the fourth one is accountable governance, which sounds quite non-peoply, but I think it's really important. And this is about that leadership, authenticity, and holding those leaders to account. We need to build structures that hold leaders to their promises. Transformation will collapse when people see leaders ignoring the rules that they set. You know, that whole do as I say, not as I do. That's going to erode your trust. That's going to collapse it. That transparency and that accountability, they've got to be non-negotiables. They're really important in making sure this sticks. And coming back again, these are not soft activities. These are levers of performance and sustainability. This is where you, as people professionals, really come into your own. This is where you bring your great skills, opportunities, and where you can really bring that magic and that shine that people professionals have. Not as compliance officers, because we're not there to be the health and safety or the fun police, are we? We're there to help this happen. You're there as cultural architects, as change leaders. And this is where you go. And these four things on a tiny scale or a big scale are things that you can all do and you can all practice in the way that you do your work. So, next slide, please. Because I am a researcher and I'm an evidence-based person, I wanted to make sure you had the evidence because some of you might like that. So I wanted to make sure that I shared the links to everything that I had and that if you wanted to, you could go and find more information about that. But before we move on to my final slide and answer any questions, I just want to close with this. Transformation, it's not about strategy, systems, or slogans. CIPD, we had a great slogan. We were talking about going for growth. So growth in membership, growth in making sure we were profitable, making sure we're having that impact. And it was a really great slogan. But actually, that wasn't what made the strategy and the change stick. What made the change stick was the people believing and the people understanding and the leaders modeling their behaviors and what they do. It's about people, culture, meaning. And if we put people first, transformation doesn't just happen, it sticks. So my rallying call to you, my call to action, if it were, as people professionals, it's our responsibility to make sure that that happens. And I believe that you have the skills and the power to do that. And hopefully I've given you a little bit of background, a little bit of evidence and information that will help you. Next slide, please. Listen, thank you for your time and attention. I know it's not always easy just listening behind a screen when there's slides coming up and all those things are happening. So I appreciate your time. I know we're not in the same room. I know that can be different. I hope it's giving you a bit of fresh insights and perhaps reinforce some things you already knew and put people first. So I think, I am open to any questions that I will try and answer. But I think, Sandra, it's back to you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. That was absolutely wonderful. So I am going to open the floor to colleagues to ask if they've got any, questions for you. So I think it was very impactful just listening to all the things that you're right. We've got a lot of transformation going on and probably a lot more ahead. We've spoken a bit about that today already. So over to my colleagues. Any questions from you all? Steve, I can see your hand up. Steve Davis.
Hi, Amanda. Really loved that presentation. Really good. I like the evidence bits. Actually, it's more of a little bit of a statement, really. Just collated some of the bits that you talked about, but just I love the talk. It's saying that actually HR as well, very much in terms of the bridging the narratives and being building that. It struck me on your last your sort of model in terms of meaningful sort of engagement, if you like, the four piece points that you made. It struck me that trying to understand the culture mapping, to me, you could almost utilize your sense making engagement as the key to sort of understanding, okay, asking questions of people, just trying to understand, because often we don't necessarily understand what the culture is, and it's very difficult to get that until you start asking the right questions. And until you need to do that, you don't tend to start to doing that as a transformation piece, and that in itself will facilitate then maybe understanding some of that culture mapping, but also some of that trust building later on. So I think that some of your model at the end, you can almost not short not make it shorter necessarily, but you can sort of collapse some of the bits and sort of utilize one of those stages to help you support the other elements in terms of achieving a meaningful change and transformation.
Yeah, completely. I don't think they work in isolation. I think they work, you can pick and choose bits of them, but I think they come together. I think we've gone through a bit of a period, haven't we, where we're almost a bit frightened for people to tell us what they think. And we kind of go, oh, that. I mean, when I joined CIPD, they had a brilliant, they were using Peakon employee engagement survey, and we were getting great results. We had we had a really brilliant employee NPS, and we were getting great results, but every month was the same. And I got kind of 12 months in, and I was just like, I don't know if I believe it anymore, because it wasn't giving me anything. And so we went out and did a whole piece of work, and I can't take credit for this. It was my colleague Kate Chappell, who worked for me, who did all the legwork on this around our employee value proposition. And we did loads of work about moving into a different people engagement survey, and we went with PX Experience, PX Hub. So we went with a different people experience hub, went with a different engagement survey. And it was really interesting because our employee NPS went down. And some of my exec colleagues got quite nervous about the fact that our employee NPS was up, but I was delighted because I knew that it wasn't quite right. Because when I was talking to people and when I was having conversations, it didn't quite match or mirror what I was seeing in my engagement survey. So actually having to go through that process of engaging, bringing people together to actually talk about what the intent is and helping them to make sense of narrative and change really allowed us to actually take a proper pulse for what was going on. And people welcomed it. People were really grateful for the opportunity to say what they thought without, look, we've all got managers people who will say, I'd like to know everyone's opinion, and no one's going to say anything because we know that they actually don't mean they don't want to hear it. I was fortunate, you're all people professionals, you know where I worked. I was incredibly fortunate. I had a team that were going, no, please tell us, it's fantastic. I never had to fight to get people on the agenda of anything. If anything, I was like, could we talk about finance first and people later? Give me a break. That'd be quite nice. But they were amazing at doing that. But even in the CIPD, which you would think would be an exemplar of this, the employees really appreciated having that time to collectively make sense of things. So I think you've got that individual sense making, you've got the collective sense making. And like you say, that'll really help you with that cultural map. That'll help you with that audit. That'll help you surface some of those assumptions and the things that are basic assumptions, because we've all got them a bit differently, haven't we? We all just assume things in different ways. I was talking to my new finance director last night, and I've spent a lot of time in not-for-profits and public sector and those sort of things, and I would never buy a train ticket, walk up. I would always try to book it at least 3 weeks in advance because I treat it as if I'm spending my own money. And he was just saying he's got a whole group of people that don't do that. And my assumption is that everybody would behave that way. But the basic assumption with other people who perhaps haven't worked in that setting before, they're not working that way. And it was a bit of an eye-opener for me because here I am, 30 years into career, 52, thinking I'm all right, thinking I know what's going on. I'm like, oh yeah, no, people do just think it's okay to walk up and pay walk-up fare for a train ticket somewhere. I can't imagine it in most of your organisations. I'm sure you're the same as me. You can imagine your finance director when they see that come through. It wouldn't work. But I love the idea of not necessarily, I don't think they're necessarily individual. I don't think they're necessarily standalone. I think if you can combine them together and use them as a toolbox or a toolkit, I think they'll really work.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And I think that just to kind of share, I think there's a bit of a challenge for us all really when we've got sort of frontline workers who work sort of far away from the sort of head office kind of scenario. So a lot of that kind of culture mapping is absolutely really important when it comes to transformation. So I really appreciate that. So if there's no other questions for Amanda. Oh, sorry, Phil. Phil Quinn. Do you want to come in, Phil, with a question?
I certainly will, as soon as I can
You.
figure out how to unmute quickly. Thank you. I'll even try and start the video. There we go. An observation, Amanda. Yeah, really, really interesting presentation. And as a function that's gone through change recently, or an area that I've worked with going through change recently, implementing that co-creation model is a really interesting experience, because what I found in a very technical area is almost like the reaction of a lot of people was either skepticism. So this is, you're just paying lip service to this, you've already decided, this is just a game kind of thing. Or it doesn't matter what we're going to tell you because you're going to do what you want to do anyway kind of thing at the end of this. Or do you know what? Just tell me what's going to happen and save me the energy of the conversation. And it's really interesting, because I think this is the benefit of using a model like this and working through it and sticking at it, is that over a period of time, actually there is some of that skepticism sort of falls by the wayside a little bit. Yeah. And actually, when people realize that there is that co-creation, that there are changes made to a proposed new structure, for example, etc., people do get on board with that and do start providing that feedback, and do, as I say, just kind of lose some of that cynicism over time. But you have to, I think my point is this, you just have to stick with it. Yes. And not be swayed by, oh, they're not interested, I'll just go back to plan A and tell them what the new structure is going to be, for example.
We've all done those town halls, haven't we, where you've gone up and you've presented and you've asked for those questions, and you just get the dust balls, or nobody says anything, and you know people have got ideas, but they feel they've been there before, they've heard it before. I love that resilience piece, and I'm not talking resilience about work harder, work longer. I love that, the fact that you just have to keep going. I think there's some real value, and it's not always popular and it's a bit old-fashioned, but there's some real value in the "you said, we did." Particularly when you're working with those frontline workers, who are, I think Sandra touched on it really well. So we've got, so like I said, we've got about 2,000 employees. 900 of those work completely remotely or work in care homes. So they're not dialing into a Teams meeting. They're not picking up emails. They're not doing that. So it's in person. And how do we help them? So it is those really simple tools, like a "you said, we did" poster, which I know a lot of comms people and a lot of modern HR people go, oh, that's really old fashioned, why do that anymore? It works. There's something about, oh, look, they did listen. It was worth it. And I think if we can, I really like the idea of being consistent. I purposely didn't do a change model because I think it doesn't take into the context of your sector, your organization, and your communities. But if you can be consistent in the things that you're doing and your approach and listening, yeah, I love that. I think that's a great idea. More of that. I've learned as well now. Thank you. I'm going to take that one away. Ask me again in 3 years when I'm see how I am at the end of 3 years here, and see if I've managed to translate the change. We've launched a new 10-year strategy. It's got 3-year short-term goals. I feel like I'm back at where I was 3 years ago, starting again. But it'll be fun. Invite me back in 3 years. I'll do you the warts and all story. Excuse me.
Amanda, it'll be fantastic, I'm sure. So that is actually the end of our conference today. It's been really, really exceptional. It's been great to hear from all of our guest speakers. Just to do a little bit of a quick recap, we've had Matt Burney, the Senior Strategic Advisor from Indeed. He's been talking about the AI shift and preparing for the future of work. We've had Steve Davis deliver our PPMA annual general meeting for 2025, followed by Trudy Birtwell, Director for Learning at Solace, talking to us about local government reform and an update and all the things that are to come. We've had Owen Mapley, the Chief Executive at SIPFA, from the public sector finance, the priorities and the challenges. We've had Charles Hipps, the Chief Executive and founder of Olio, talking about all those ways we can use AI as tools to help support us in the changes that are happening in recruitment. And last but certainly not least, we've had Amanda Arrowsmith, and making sure that I think it's a good note to end on. We all need to remember that, you know, it is around putting people first, and making that extra effort to do so will actually help us make transformation stick.